Well, there's no doubt about it. There's a bit of a dilemma for South Africa. And let's look at the legal options with Dr. Atilla Kisla. He's International Justice Cluster Head from the Southern African Litigation Centre. Thank you so much for joining us. You heard what the President had to say. We also know, of course, that there's an interministerial team looking at what the options are. We've seen a number of mixed messages, though, coming from government. We had the head of the Defence Force last week saying we're definitely not going to arrest Putin. Some suggestions that all delegates get diplomatic immunity. But, of course, that's unlikely to cover him because that's just for petty crimes. That's my understanding anyway. You're the expert. Talk to us about South Africa's obligations in terms of the Rome Statute and our membership of the International Criminal Court. Bearing in mind, we've actually written this into our local laws, haven't we?
Exactly. Thanks for having me. I think there's a shorter answer to the question, which is if there is a request by the court, South Africa would be obliged to abide by that request from the ICC and would be under an obligation to surrender or arrest him, whatever the request is saying. However, why I might think that the government, the state is taking so long to deliberate is the one part of the question, the answer I just gave you, is whether there has been a request. As of now, I think it is still unclear whether there has been a request by the ICC, and that might be a reason why the government is still deliberating about this question. And in that regard, I think it's important to zoom out when we speak about the legal obligations. And of course, there's like high similarities to the dated, I think, almost exactly 8 years ago. And in both cases, we had sitting head of state and we had the ICC issuing an arrest warrant. But in this case, in the matter of the Russian president, we do not have a UN Security Council resolution or referral to the ICC, and we also don't have Russia as a state party of the ICC. So that makes things much more complex and puts us actually in an area which, in the Rome Statute, which actually limits the court's ability to proceed with a request. So that area is Article 98, and that article actually sets out that the court may actually not proceed with a request for surrender or assistance. South Africa to act inconsistently with its immunity obligations under customary international law or under other international agreements, unless the ICC could obtain a waiver of immunity from Russia, which seems to be highly unlikely at this point. But I would like to emphasize that whatever the court's final interpretation of that Article 98 will be, Article 98 is not a provision that grants a member like South Africa the right to decline or to some kind of veto to a request. If that request is there, South Africa will have to abide by it, and it's voluntarily signed up to the Rome Statute.
Let me just break this down to keep it really simple. So even though there's, the ICC has issued an arrest warrant, and even though we are signatories to the Rome Statute and part of the ICC, it's in our laws, we wouldn't have to act unless there's a specific request coming from the ICC to the South African government. Is that correct?
Technically, yes. In the al-Bashir matter, that request was only sent to just, I think, a little bit more than a week before the AU summit has started. That's why I think the government is still deliberating and exploring that option of Article 98. I saw reports last week from the Director General of DIRCO saying that they have sent an inquiry to the ICC inquiring about whether a waiver has been obtained for the Russian president, a waiver of immunity from Russia. So that's what makes this case so interesting and also so different from the al-Bashir matter.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that your organisation was very involved in the al-Bashir matter in 2015. So South Africa, and it seems that you mentioned that with the al-Bashir matter, there was actually even more reason to act. And you spoke of a UN resolution around al-Bashir. But there have been UN resolutions against Russia, which we haven't signed. So just take me through the UN aspect and the difference between what happened with al-Bashir, or what didn't happen with al-Bashir, but what our obligations were.
So in the al-Bashir matter, we had what we call a referral to the ICC by the UN Security Council. And that UN Security Council resolution is binding upon all members of the UN. And in that case, that UN Security Council resolution, the referral to the ICC, made Sudan a quasi-member state, to say it in a simplified way. In this case, we don't have that kind of whilst there were UN General Assembly resolutions, we don't have a UN Security Council resolutions, because, as you know, Russia is sitting on the Security Council, and if a resolution like that would come up, they would just probably just veto it. So in this case, we don't have that kind of resolution, and Russia is also not a state party to the ICC. So that's why Article 98 tried to regulate that. But it is still contested, and it's, that provision remains open for discussion under the legal commentators.
We know that there's an interministerial meeting about this very issue right now. What you're describing really suggests that actually we wouldn't at this point necessarily be obliged to arrest Putin if he arrives in this country. Am I right?
I think if he were to arrive in the country, we would have to see, South Africa would have to see where a request of an arrest or assistance has been made by the ICC. And if such a request has been made, South Africa is under an obligation to arrest them. At this stage, I don't have any information whether a request has been made. It could be that a request has already been made, and then South Africa would be under the obligation of the Rome Statute. Right.
In 2015, so as you've explained so clearly, we were actually under a greater obligation to act, and our country did not. We know that South Africa was found to have erred by not arresting him. But what happened? Was South Africa punished in any way? I don't think so. From what I can recall, you'd know better than me. No sanctions, as far as I know. Would you say it was just a reputational loss?
I think that's the question, right? Whilst there was a decision by the ICC saying that South Africa didn't act in accordance with its obligations under the Rome Statute, there have been no further sanctions. The matter wasn't even referred to the UN General Assembly, which the ICC, Assembly of State Parties, sorry, which the ICC is capable of doing. But I think at that stage it was a greater harm to the credibility and South Africa's reputation in terms of its stance in fighting impunity and prosecuting these most serious crimes.
Of course, the geopolitical environment is quite different around Putin. We're seeing a great deal of polarization, and some of our best trading partners are very anti what Vladimir Putin is doing in Ukraine. There's a lot potentially at stake. Do you think that it's a risk we shouldn't take? I mean, obviously there's, I would imagine there's a moral obligation apart from the legal. But in terms of practicalities, if we fail to arrest him, even if we are then requested by the ICC, as you say, still has to come through to your knowledge, could the consequences this time round be much worse than with al-Bashir?
I think so. I think so, because there has been like there are these emerging blocks with respect to the conflict in Ukraine, and it might very well be that the repercussions might be more severe this time. But I think South Africa should rather use the momentum that has been created through the Ukraine situation and this issue of the arrest warrant, and actually should itself like use this momentum and the increased state's interest in issues of international criminal law and international criminal justice to actually also shed light on other situations like the situation in Palestine, the situation in Afghanistan, because like we shouldn't only think that the paradigm of international criminal justice will rise or fall with only this one case. But definitely this case has created some momentum, and South Africa should use that momentum to, as it always reiterates, that there are these other situations, and it should use that to shed more light on those situations and to maybe ultimately also achieve an expedited investigation into other situations.
So are you suggesting that if Putin does come here and we end up arresting him, we could almost use that as leverage to shine a light on other situations that have not been treated fairly? And I'm thinking, you know, there's been so much criticism of the United States around the invasion of Iraq and Britain of the invasion of Iraq. Is that the sort of example? Are you saying that we could reclaim the moral high ground by acting against Putin and use that to our advantage?
I'm not sure that would be what I'm saying, because I think that what I'm saying is that if South Africa is in a situation, of course, where it has to decide whether it has to arrest or not arrest him, I think it is a difficult situation, no doubt. But even before whatever the outcome of that situation will be, I think South Africa should not now turn its back to the ICC or International Criminal Justice, because we have this jurisprudence by our courts and the Domestic Act, which is actually beyond what the ICC would actually require. So it's something rather to be proud of than be scared of, actually.
It seems a little, though, that we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If we don't arrest Putin and he comes here, we're going to really upset a lot of our big trading partners. If we do arrest him, we have an enemy in Russia, I think, almost immediately, and he has issued threats. Do you think, if you were advising the South African government, would you be urging them to get this BRICS conference moved out of the country?
I think that is a political question, and as a legal person myself, I think I'm not in a position to give that proper advice. But I think it is certainly a difficult decision to make, and whatever the outcome will be, I think South Africa should not turn, like I said, turn its back on the ICC or International Criminal Justice in total. So I think it's certainly a difficult decision, but it is up for the government to make that decision now. I think the sooner a decision will be made, the more transparent and that decision actually is, the better it will be for anyone engaged in this matter. Because we shouldn't wait until the BRICS summit to make a decision. We should rather have that decision made long in advance so everyone can prepare.
Yes, I think we all remember the last-minute nature of what happened in 2015. I want to ask you a final question about the International Criminal Court. One of the criticisms is that the United States is not a member. And, you know, there's a sense that the United States expects everyone to do as they say, but not as they do. What do you make of criticism that the ICC is not set up in the right way to hold everyone to account?
I think there has been criticism for quite some time now. And, of course, if you look at the cases that the ICC has investigated or prosecuted, you will see that many of those cases were also like self-referrals by states. So I'm not sure whether that statement, whether I can confirm that statement. But certainly the ICC has made mistakes in the past. no doubt. But one should also bear in mind that the ICC itself is going through a reform process right now. And states that are party to the ICC should actively engage in that reform process when we speak about the selection of situations and in terms of investigations, capacity, and things like that. So that member states to the ICC can actually strengthen and support the court in the best way possible.
Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Completely fascinating. Dr. Atilla Kisla, International Justice Cluster Head from the Southern Africa Litigation Centre. Do stay with us on SA Tonight.